Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late night talk program featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Friday edition of the program. And our phone number, if you want to give us a call, 833-4-VALDEZ, 833-4-VALDEZ. So this is something I've been wanting to talk about for a few days. There's a lot of news today. There's plenty of things to talk about tonight. But we have some news that is not so hard news, right? Some interesting news that we're seeing. Obviously, everybody's in one way or another dealing with graduations. I know that graduations are plentiful this time of year. So this is why I was at a graduation a couple of days ago. And I mentioned it briefly on the air, but there are some graduation stories that I wanted to share with you guys before we jump into the heavy stories of homelessness in America and how that's a crisis that's really masking another crisis, right? It's really a mental health crisis and something we're not doing much to fix. There's also the conversation of what's going on with President Biden and his meeting with Prime Minister Modi from India. So we're going to get to that as well. And, of course, I want to talk about everything that's happening with yet another attack on green energy, right? Or I should say on gas stoves in the name of green energy. But first, I want to talk about the college graduate, right? There's a college graduate story. If you haven't seen this viral video that's been going around for a couple of days, it struck a chord for me because, as you know, and I get criticized for this all the time, and whenever I get criticized for it, I do it a little bit more just to bother the critics. I always add that my last name is spelled with an S at the end because, I just like it to be spelled correctly. I don't think that's too much to ask. Most people want their name spelled and pronounced correctly. So, I sympathize in, a little bit with this story, but I'm not going to go off the deep end just yet. But a college graduate went up for her graduation, and I guess their system was flawed, right? Instead of having the names printed out, or I guess they had them printed out, but they didn't have a phonetic pronouncer like we typically do in radio so that we don't screw up somebody's name when they come on the show. And the person giving the awards, one of the administrators, the college president, whoever it was, asked them to say their name. And then they go ahead and say it. So this young lady, her name was Kadia Iman. She claims that she wasn't even through pronouncing her name when the woman just said her name and brought her up on the stage and mispronounced her name. So she became upset, and she went to take the microphone to correct her name. And it became a struggle over the microphone. And here are these two women going at it, struggling over this microphone. The student eventually wins. And, well, rather than me tell you the story, I want you to hear the audio. Listen to this.
Okay, let's go. Let's go. You didn't let me get my moment, so I want to say my name is Khadijata Diallo, and I'm graduating today. I don't like how you snatched the mic out of my hand, so today is going to be all about me.
Oh, drops the mic. Congratulations!
And she threw the mic on the ground. And again, I don't condone any of that stuff. I think that was, while good theatrics and great for, making public relations, if that was her goal, she definitely made the goal. But I understand the feeling behind it, right? I don't condone what she did, but it's an interesting thing to watch. And when you watch it, I can't help but think some people are bothered more than others, right? People call me Valdez with a Z, and it's like, oh, whatever. It sounds the same. I get it. I just tell them us with an S, and I correct it. But it's not a huge deal. But what she claimed was that there were other students that had gone before her, and they were given enough time to say their name, their major, other information like where they were going to school, just had more time, and that she was rushed. And she also claimed that she felt that it was being done because she was African American. Now, I can understand people with a chip on their shoulder, and I only know this because I happen to be brown. Now, I can't say that I experience racism on a regular basis because I don't. But I also can't say that I've never experienced racism because I think I have. I mean, I remember once having a, excuse me, a large White Castle. If you don't know White Castle, it's a fast food place, makes small burgers. But I remember I went to a nightclub in Hoboken, New Jersey some years ago, and I parked part of my car, not the whole car, but part of my car on a yellow line that was part of a bus stop. So when I came back, I didn't realize that I had parked, like the left side of the car on that line, and I'd gotten a ticket. And I was upset with this ticket because I was like, oh, come on. I could barely see it. You're talking inches here that I'm touching this line. But I was like, whatever. So being visibly upset, I take the ticket and I rip it up. And the cop that gave me the ticket saw me do that. So the cop comes over to me and says, you got to pick up the ticket that you just ripped. And I was like, oh, I was intending to pick it up. I was just angry. And he said, otherwise, you'll get another ticket. And that one's like $350. And that's for littering. And I said, yeah, no, listen, I got it. I don't need 2 tickets in one day. Thanks. So, I turn on my car. I get in the car and I turn it around and I'm on my way out. And the cop was trying to leave. So I said, all right, no, go ahead. You can go. And he said, no, I have to stand here anyway. So, he had gotten out of his car and he was like, yeah, just, make sure next time you come, don't, the line might be faded, but it's still a yellow line and it's a bus stop area and you can't, whatever. I said, all right, no problem. So at that moment, a bunch of kids who I could see, a few blonde kids, they drive by and really fast and they yell to me and my friends, you effing SPICs, while the cop is talking to me at my window. And I thought, wow, that's really in bad form and poor taste. And if the cop wasn't here, it'd be probably a different story. I just pointed at them. I said, wow, look at that. I said, I'm batting 1,000 here, right? About to get I got a ticket. You're telling me you're going to give me another ticket. And I've got the welcome wagon over here. And again, what was I going to do? What happened, though, is that they threw this this White Castle large-sized drink. I guess they tried to throw it at me or at the cop or at somebody. It missed all of us, and it hit like, a few feet away from my car. But the cop was like, oh, whatever. And then he took off trying to go get them or whatever. But it stood out for me. And I thought, wow, of all the things in the world that could have happened, that's what happened. So I know that, racism exists. And even if it wasn't for the sake of race, although this was definitely a Hispanic slur, it was done to be stupid. Maybe they were drinking. After all, it was Hoboken and it was nighttime. But my point is, I've seen these things before. Most of the time I'm doing something professional. So I usually have a sport jacket on or I have whatever. But there's times where I just have on a pair of jeans and a hooded sweatshirt. And, I'm bald. So I tend to use the hood on the hooded sweatshirt, especially if it's a little breezy. And I can tell you the reception that I get from going places when I'm dressed like that versus wearing a sport jacket or something, 2 different receptions, right? Nobody's happy to see me when I have a hood on or a ball cap or something like that. So I can just tell you that that's what I've experienced in my life. And I don't know if it's because of race or if people just don't like people that wear ball caps and hooded sweatshirts. But I have a sense that a lot of people wear ball caps and hooded sweatshirts and don't always get treated differently. And I'm talking whether you go in a store or whatever and what have you. So, these are things that I've personally experienced. So I realize that people can perceive things that they might feel is racially motivated. And it's not necessarily racially motivated, but it might be. Right? So, and I think that's what happened with this girl here. She had a chip on her shoulder probably from hearing her name mispronounced lots of different times. And in her head thinking, if my name were like Bethany or Betty Joe or something like that, that may not be as ethnically black, that it might be easier to pronounce. But that in and of itself is not a crime, and I understand her angst. What I don't understand is why she grabbed the mic, fought with the teacher, and made a show. Some are speculating it was to promote her OnlyFans account, which is an online subscription service, usually for adult content. So anyway, I wanted to share that as a setup to another story, but I'm going to save that story for a little later. So you're going to have to stick with me. And we're going to continue our discussions tonight on lots of things, including everything that I mentioned before. So I don't want you to go anywhere. Thanks for bearing with me. My voice is a little bit hoarse, but we're going to soldier on. Straight ahead, there's a lot to come, so don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
The proposed efficiency standards are not a ban on gas stoves again. The department does not want to, nor can it, ban gas stoves. The Biden-Harris administration has specifically stated that it is not in favor of banning gas stoves. Republicans are deliberately misrepresenting the facts and misrepresenting data, all while focusing on this made-up war, let's call it that, on gas stoves and ignoring far more pressing issues for Americans across the country. We're about saving lives. That's more important than what we're seeing about how comfortable it is to have a gas stove in the manner that we have them now. It's okay. New technology comes out, new information comes out. I think we should move forward with that. And we don't have to ban gas stoves to do it.
All right. That is Cori Bush. She's a congresswoman. That was her last month at a hearing saying the Biden administration is not in favor of banning gas stoves. And then if you listen through the staccato of her lengthy message, basically she says, but we are in favor of new technology that could ultimately replace gas stoves. And so they're not banning the gas, but they are. It's exactly what they want to do is replace these gas stoves. And it's just fascinating to me how, I don't want to tell you that we're banning gas stoves, but we're going to be banning gas stoves. So anyway, I was looking at AOL today, of all things, and I see there's a new study out that finds more evidence that gas stoves are bad for human health, saying it's worse now than secondhand smoke. And I thought, this really can't be the case, right? I mean, how is it that we've lived all of our lives with gas stoves? At least I have, my entire life. And while I might have a sore throat today and have a little bit of a cough because of allergies and whatnot, it's not my everyday situation. So, I mean, we need to get with somebody who's definitely done the investigative footwork on this. And that's why I wanted to speak with Kevin Stocklin. He's an investigative reporter at the Epoch Times. He's also a writer and a film producer and has done some really interesting work on the 2008 mortgage crisis. But Kevin Stocklin, welcome to the program, sir.
Thanks for having me on.
It's my pleasure. Now, I know that you've covered gas stoves, and I'm wondering, with this article that I'm seeing today and this apparent new study that says that gas stoves can raise the level of carcinogen benzene throughout the home, if this is something that is ultimately now going to lead to a reinvigorated push to ban gas stoves.
Well, it's very interesting the way that this administration is operating. What we're seeing now is kind of the third leg of the Green New Deal. So first they went after the fossil fuel producers, the oil companies, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Then they went after the utilities to get them to switch to wind and solar. Now they're coming after the consumers. And technically, at a federal level, she is correct. They're not banning anything, but what they are doing, and not just with gas stoves, with other appliances, refrigerators, washer dryers, and also with cars, they are using federal agencies to set regulatory and emissions and other standards so tight that manufacturers are being forced to take these products off the market. So what they're effectively doing is saying, we're not telling you can't buy these things. They're just not going to be available anymore.
Yeah, it's so duplicitous the way that it's presented. And from your understanding of it, do you feel, I know that they've made this push in New York and some other places, is part of the strategy to ban it in certain states or at the statewide level so that they could say, look, at the federal level, we're not doing anything? Or is it, are they all in to just go for the elimination of the production of these things?
Well, they're doing both at the same time. So in states, particularly California, New York, Washington, states where they have really the Democrat trifecta control of senates and houses and the governor's offices, they are doing outright bans. So they will be banning gas stoves. Massachusetts is banning gas heating in homes, and they've also banned the sale of new internal combustion engine cars within about the next 7 years, depending on the state. At the federal level, they are not as explicit as that, as you say. They're a little bit more duplicitous, and there they are just putting the screws to manufacturers to force them effectively to take these products off the market. So it's really coming from both directions at the same time. California is an enormous market, so is New York. And so, manufacturers are going to be beholden to that to some extent if they can't sell internal combustion engine cars or gas stoves or gas heating in those markets.
Man. So, I think it's interesting when you look at a situation like this where I think there's a lot of fallout here. I mean, it's not just people's right or perceived right or desire to buy a gas stove, but moreover, I think it's the elimination of not only one industry, but probably a couple of industries as you start to produce these, electric ranges and whatnot, which really don't work as well or the same. And I feel like it's not like everybody who works in the gas industry, if you ban, gas sourced heating for homes and gas cooking appliances, what happens to the gas people? What type of impact do you think overall, economically speaking, something like this, if it were to take effect, would actually have?
Well, manufacturers, for one, are predicting a lot of damage as a result of this. Car makers are certainly going to be hit very hard, but also appliance makers are going to be hit as well. And, the manufacturers have just come out and protested. There were 131 manufacturing companies across the U.S. that said normally, they are part of these conversations when new regulations get set, but they've been excluded from these. And they say it's such a deluge, such an incredible amount of new regulation that's hitting them from all directions at once in this administration that they say, a number of them, particularly the smaller ones, could just be put out of business by it. But the big picture, that people need to kind of see with all of this is what they are doing is they are driving Americans towards ever heavier dependence on our electric grid. So the stoves are electric, home heating is electric, cars are electric. And if you listen to anybody, even from the government themselves, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, they are basically telling you the grid cannot handle this. So your average EV uses about 2.5 times as much energy or electricity rather as the home heating and air conditioning unit in our homes. Now, as you know, the grid is basically set up to cover peak demand, and that's when it comes in the summer from air conditioning units. So you're talking about more than doubling that demand with cars. It's cars.
Man.
And
Kevin
they say there's no way that the grid
hang
can
on
handle it.
right there. Just stand by for a moment. The music means we got to take a quick pause, and we're coming right back with Kevin Stocklin. He's an investigative journalist with the Epoch Times. We're discussing gas stoves and overall this huge push with the Green New Deal. Don't go anywhere. There's a lot more to come straight ahead. Plus, some federal agencies are routinely spying on phone calls, texts, and emails. Wait till you hear this.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. We're continuing our conversation with Kevin Stocklin, investigative journalist at the Epoch Times. And he was just explaining to us how these increased costs are really going to hurt manufacturers. Kevin Stocklin.
Thanks for having me on.
So let's pick up where you left off. And you were in the middle of a point when the music kicked in. But you were making the case that the increased cost was eventually, I guess, going to trickle down. Is that right?
Well, the bigger issue is how much Americans are being driven by these regulations. Yes, the manufacturers are being hurt, but at the same time, Americans are being driven by these regulations to be more and more dependent on our electric grid. So, currently we have a diversity of power sources, right? We can drive our cars with gasoline, we can heat our homes with gas, and we can use electricity for our computers or whatever. We are now being pushed into total dependence on the electric grid. And two things that Americans need to be aware of. First of all, the grid cannot handle this additional demand. But behind the scenes, also because of the Green New Deal, our grid is becoming increasingly unstable because we're becoming more dependent on wind and solar as they retire coal and gas-fired plants. And as we know, wind and solar are very weather dependent. And so people are predicting, also in the federal government, regulators, et cetera, that rolling blackout could become the norm for American society, just as we're becoming more dependent on electricity.
It's kind of like what we see in California with the brownouts and the rolling blackouts, and even in other areas where there's a strained grid.
Yes, and maybe it could even be things that we see like in Iraq, where you get power at certain hours or certain times of the year, and then otherwise you don't.
Oh, yeah. I get my coffee every day at a small Cuban place, and this guy goes back to Cuba for 2 weeks every summer. And the last trip he took, he told me, he said, the island goes dark for like 24 hours, or 12 hours, like overnight, every single day. And you can only have power at certain hours and in certain cities. It was the craziest thing. I couldn't believe that's actually happening because you don't really hear about that. But he said, yeah, it's the regular, it's the norm in Cuba.
Yeah, and you can imagine, if some sort of a weather emergency were to hit and the power goes out and all you have is an EV, you're not going anywhere. So, there's a lot more risk to this than just inconvenience.
Absolutely. Now, this goes hand in hand with another topic that I know you've written about as well, which is the environmental, what is that? Sustainability, ESG.
The environmental, yes. The ESG, that's environmental, social, and governance. And
that's it, social and governance.
Yeah.
Horrible social credit scoring system.
Yes. Well, what they've done is they've packaged together really all of the progressive agendas. So the environmental is everything with climate change. Social has to do with the whole racial agenda. And then governance is pretty much how you control companies and things like this through boards and whatnot. So this is a way that they've gotten the corporate sector aligned with the federal government. And as we're seeing now with things like surveillance and whatnot, they're able to use companies to do the things that the government can't legally do, like surveillance without a warrant, like censorship of speech and things like this.
Now, I know you've written recently about how there's some shareholder votes that are showing support for ESG, and it's actually failing, right? That people aren't as supportive. Is that right?
Yeah, well, so what people need to understand about the ESG industry, this is being driven by institutional asset managers. So currently, between 70 and 80% all the shares in U.S. companies, they're not held by us directly, even though it's our money. We buy through mutual funds, pension funds, index funds, whatever. And so there's a small list of asset managers, whether that's big companies like BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, or California and New York pension funds. They get to vote the shares. They get to control those shares. And so they really are the ones who drive company policy. They get people on the board. They set corporate policy and all these things. And so they are, very able to put the agenda through, and they do. They've all signed on to pledges through these clubs like Climate Action 100 that they're going to take out the fossil fuel industry and push racial justice and all these things. One interesting thing that we have started to see is there's now pushback coming against this. We're starting to see it. They're starting to see the results of all this, whether it's Disney or Bud Light or Target. They're starting to see their bills go up, their food bills, their fuel bills, everything else. And so, and we're also seeing more people shedding light on what's going on behind the scenes in corporate boardrooms. And so for the first time, we saw these asset managers be a little less willing this year to support all the agenda items that come up for a vote than they were in previous years.
I guess it's a step in the right direction because ESG seems like a step in the wrong direction. Folks, we're on with an investigative journalist from the Epoch Times, Kevin Stocklin, and we're going to continue with him straight ahead. He's also got a piece on how the government spies on us from time to time, and nobody's the wiser for it. I want to get into that. Plus, your calls and more coming up after that. 833-4-VALDES, 833-4-VALDES.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Welcome back. Kevin Stocklin is our guest, investigative reporter for the Epoch Times. And our conversation is on what's going on with the government, what's going on with how they do what they do, how they justify what they do in the name of the Green New Deal, what they do in the name of ESG, the environment, social governance metrics, and, of course, how they now, in the name of whatever they feel like, federal agencies routinely spy on phone calls, text messages, and emails of American citizens, according to experts. Kevin Stocklin, tell us about it.
Yeah, well, the federal government is very curious about us and our habits and our everyday behavior. And two major things happened this year. One, we have something called the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, and this has its roots in the September 11th event and efforts by the federal government to combat foreign terrorism. But this provision called FISA, Section 702, basically granted intelligence agencies the authority to spy on foreign nationals because they were fighting terrorism. That provision was passed with a sunset clause, and it has to be reauthorized in December. So Congress is debating whether or not to renew this authorization. At the same time, because we now have a GOP majority in the House, they are holding quite a number of hearings, and what they seem to be finding out, what appears to be happening, is there are all sorts of revelations of abuse of these laws that federal agencies and law enforcement, FBI, DOJ, et cetera, are using these provisions not to spy on foreigners or in addition to spying on foreigners to spy on American citizens. And
most notably, we saw them spy on a president and a whole presidential campaign.
Yes, absolutely. That is the most high-profile case, but, this seems to be drilling down to your average American as well. Wow. And the issue here is that the Fourth Amendment of our Constitution guarantees us or protects us from search and seizure without a warrant, without probable cause that a crime has been committed. So the government doesn't have the right to just scan through and sort through all this data trying to see, hey, has anybody committed a crime? So they're using the provisions of this law that was supposed to be an exception for foreign terrorism to spy on everyday Americans. And the latest revelation that's come out, the GOP House forced the government to declassify a document, and it turns out that our intelligence agencies are using data brokers. These are private companies, and what they do is they're able to go through information that companies may have on us and collect this, and then they turn it over to the government. So this could be your cell phone communication. It could be your text messages. It could be your activity on Facebook, things like this. So it just came to light that they are now using data brokers to collect this information on Americans.
Now, this sounds like a backdoor approach. Obviously, if they're going to, we saw this with the Twitter files, where they would go to Twitter and take a look at your personal geo data and find out lots of things that they could normally not find out if it weren't for getting a warrant. And is this warrantless backdoor something that a loophole, I guess, that we can foresee being closed, or should we just expect that they're just going to buy our information rather than get a warrant for it?
Well, a lot of the legal justification for this goes back to something called the Bank Secrecy Act. And this is the provision that basically forces banks to collect data on all transactions above $10,000. And this was originally passed in the 70s to fight money laundering that the mafia was doing and things like this. And this went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled on something called the third-party doctrine. And they basically said when people hand over their personal information to a third party, like a bank or a phone company, you lose your privacy rights under the Constitution. But we're in a different world from the 1970s today. We have, smart technology, smart security systems. We have our phones. And so all of this private data that companies should be keeping secure and private is much more intrusive than it would have been, back 50 years ago. And so the hope is that a case may make its way to the Supreme Court on this issue, and everything that's going on now with FISA and with these allegations of abuse by intelligence agencies may prompt a case that goes up to the Supreme Court. And the hope is that this Supreme Court today will look at it and say, no, the third-party doctrine does in fact violate the Fourth Amendment, and Americans need to have some privacy and some rights to their personal information.
Right. Otherwise, there's no check and balance on the government, and there's no privacy for the citizen. It makes a lot of sense to me. Folks, Kevin Stocklin is our guest, and he's an investigative reporter with the Epoch Times. He's also a film producer. He produced We All Fall Down, The American Mortgage Crisis, a documentary back in 2008. And we've had him on before discussing the shadow state and other things. Kevin Stocklin, what are some of the projects that you're working on now? Are you doing any film?
Well, the latest was The Shadow State, and we just finished that one, and that's now available. You can see that at theshadowstate.com, and it's free to all Epoch Times subscribers. So theepochtimes.com, you can read my reports, and you can stream that for free. It's also available now on DVD. And what I've been focusing on is also doing a lot of reporting and writing on that subject, on ESG, on the power grid and the power industry, and all of these issues that have to do with preserving our constitutional rights.
Now, if folks want to read some of your writings, obviously they can go to theshadowstate.com for the film or to theepochtimes.com for your reports. But is there any other website or social media handle where they can follow you?
At this point, that's your best bet.
All right. Well, folks, Kevin Stocklin, again, investigative reporter for the Epoch Times, and all-around great guy, knows his stuff. I'm glad you're here with us tonight. Check him out at theepochtimes.com or at theshadowstate.com. Kevin, have a great weekend. We appreciate it.
You too. Nice talking to you.
Likewise. All right, America. There is more to come straight ahead. Who's the biggest culprit from this, or I should say, who's inspiring this ESG nonsense? Well, Xi Jinping and the rest of these guys that believe in capitalism and communism at the same time. We're going to talk about China at the top of the next hour, so stick with us on that. Plus, we're going to get to your calls and more, and I'll finish that story about the graduation I wanted to get to. It's an interesting story, and I want your feedback on it as well. So don't go anywhere. We're coming right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
I want to listen to you, Rich, all the time.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. It's Rich Valdez, and despite my raspy voice, we're taking calls, and we are live. Let's go to Charleston, West Virginia, WCHS. Tommy, go right ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Valdez. Thank you for the opportunity.
Sir, how are you?
I understand you're going to talk about China a little bit. Let me tie that into lithium.
Sure.
You spoke to the gentleman last hour about lithium a little bit. lithium is a very rare mineral and metal, and it is, I think the Congo in Africa is one of the great, as in the top source. And China has worked out some kind of an agreement with them to get do a lot of mining. We're going to end up having to go down into the ocean floor in places similar to the way they go for oil here and there to get lithium. And that poses a whole nother bag of questions for the environmentalists. The idea that we're going to go to an electric fleet of vehicles here in America or planet Earth in the near future is ludicrous. They're rushing into this with their eyes wide shut. The lithium battery, by the way, you want to change your battery in your car tomorrow, Mr. Valdez? Go ahead. You and I could do it, and I'm an old man. Try it with a lithium battery. You need a forklift. These things are heavy.
It's funny, not to interrupt, but just to add, there was a story we covered not too long ago. There was a garage collapse in Manhattan, and they said that it happened because there was a bunch of electric vehicles there, and those cars weigh a ton more than regular cars.
And when the bigger the vehicle, SUV, pickup truck, the bigger the battery. The other thing is, I don't know if they are more prone to fires than the conventional battery. But when you got a lithium battery fire, it could take like 10,000 gallons of water to put it out. The car will burst into flames once you put it up after it's been out for an hour. There's a government operation in the state of Maryland where they are expert. They teach people, other firemen, how to deal with lithium fires. And there's very, very few of them, those in the country. They're doing it in Maryland. The other thing about lithium, if you think that it's not dangerous or volatile almost inherently, why don't they fly it on airplanes? They don't want it.
Good point.
They take it in a ship or a railroad car or a truck. They don't want to put it on an airplane for transport. That's part because it's so heavy and part because of the fire issue. Thank you for all this time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you know what? It's I appreciate it. It's always a pleasure to speak with somebody in West Virginia who sounds like you grew up down the block from me. So I appreciate that, Tommy.
Bye-bye.
Take care, man. All right, folks. There is more to come straight ahead. And, yeah, it's true. This lithium-ion stuff it's interesting. And something Tommy said was interesting, that China's worked out a deal. He put it very nicely. Yeah, they've pretty much monopolized this years ago. And it's part of their unrestricted warfare here, this monopolistic tactic that they use with cornering the market, including our medication, right? So you're talking about people dying of fentanyl. They call them overdoses, but they're really poisonings because people don't know if they're taking real pills or fake pills. And granted, if you buy it at your local pharmacy, you're probably getting the real stuff. But unfortunately, there's a bunch of artificial counterfeit pills that are all over the market. Anyway, that's just one more thing that I wanted to add. We're going to continue our conversation on China with General Anthony Tata. He's coming up next. And I wanted to get to my story about the graduation, not the story that I told before about the young lady in New York that stole the mic from the professor and then threw it on the floor when she was done, but my own story about my kid and her graduation. I've got a story there that I want to share with you. So I guess I'm going to have to wait a little bit because I need a little time to work through it, but hopefully you guys will stick with me through hour number 2 and into hour number 3 because Open Phone America starts in hour number 3. But right now we're about to kick off hour number 2. Thank you for putting up with my sore throat. And we're going to continue this conversation straight ahead. 833-4-VALDEZ is the phone number. 833, the number 4, Valdez, my last name, or at Rich Valdez with an S on all of the social media. I will be checking that in a little bit, and we'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, your liberty-loving Latino amigo. And it's my pleasure to be here with you on this Friday night, keeping you company till 1 a.m. Eastern time. And our phone number I gave you, let me give you the social media handle. It's at Rich Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez. I check that periodically so that we can keep in touch and continue the conversation there as well. Now, I want to get into a couple of things. We were just talking about ESG and how the big push for the Green New Deal benefits China and other places, but really China is really one of the main culprits here that seems to have a lot to gain. And there are others, right? There's also India, and we saw President Biden meeting with Prime Minister Modi from India just this week, and we have a clip of audio from that. Let me see. Which one do I want? There's a couple. Let's go with the first one. Listen to this.
Prime Minister and I had a good discussion about democratic values, and that's the nature of our relationship. We're straightforward with each other, and we respect each other.
Now, Biden says they respect each other, and I think that's a clever thing to say because, you know, I wouldn't say that I like the guy, right, being one of the biggest polluters, and they're willing to sell you out in a heartbeat, but you have to have a certain cordiality, right, with these with these world leaders. And it's kind of like when people would used to criticize President Trump for saying that, you know, he respected President Xi or he thought he was a very smart man. You have to play ball, right, in my best estimation. But so I want to get into that visit and the role that plays in the geopolitical sphere, as well as what's going on with China as well. And our guest to help us get to the bottom of things here, retired Brigadier General Anthony Tata from the U.S. Army. Welcome, sir.
Hey, Rich, great to be with you.
It's always a pleasure. And folks, you might remember we've had Anthony Tata on before. General Tata wrote the book Total Empire, a Garrett Sinclair novel, and we'll talk a little bit about that again in the second segment. But right now, I want to jump into getting your thoughts on Modi's visit with President Biden.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, I think, Rich, that India is a strategic partner for us. They're so critical in having some kind of balance of power with China in that part of the world. Geopolitically, they've got a long border with China, and there's a lot of tension up there in that mountainous region. Plus, they're the dominant gene in the Indian Ocean in the south, and China is trying to push down through the Malacca Strait north of Indonesia there, through in the Maldives and up into the western parts of the Indian Ocean. And India is a big factor there. When I performed the duties as Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, had many conversations with counterparts in India in that part of the world, and certainly my East Asia team worked tirelessly to try to get major defense deals with India. The more that we can partner with them, the better. And so I think it's a good thing that the administration is having conversations with India. And plus, it's not only about countering China. That's probably the most important strategic geopolitical aspect to it. But they're a huge trade partner as well. They're the largest nation in the world. They're fastest growing, and certainly, I don't know if they qualify as a democracy anymore technically, but we'll call them one. And certainly, the more that we can try to influence democratic values, which goes hand in hand with capitalism and free markets, the better, because that opens up a massive trading partner with the United States. And the more that U.S. businesses can engage Indian businesses, that's better for our middle class, better for our small businesses in the United States. So really two things going on here from my point of view as a former DoD official and retired Army senior leader. It's the countering China and deterring China. And then as a businessman myself today, being able to tap into those markets and have trading partners.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think, to me, they're almost one and the same, right? Just to kind of echo what you said. And I'm not any of the things that you mentioned. You have an impressive resume. And all I know is, I read the news. And I look at this and I think, if we don't play ball with India, then they're clearly going to feel like they can play ball with anybody they want, including China, right? And if China's at their beck and call saying, hey, well, either, whether it's through coercion or through bribery, one or the other, and we're not doing our own version of bribery, a.k.a. Diplomacy, saying, hey, look, we'll do trade with you. You can make millions of dollars, American dollars, right? And I've always felt that's the crux of so much of our foreign policy is if we let them in on the dollar trade, they become our friend for the most part, unless they absolutely hate us. And I know that's a very simplistic way of looking at it, but it seems to be what kind of rules the roost. Am I onto something, or do you think I'm out of here?
You're absolutely on to sometimes the simplest path is the best path, right? And certainly engaging India, making them in some way a strategic partner, perhaps even an ally in the future. We can then get them leaning at least 51% in our direction instead of China's direction. And they have real conflict with China in the northeast part of their border. And so they are interested in the United States and in our ability to influence and counter China hand in hand with them. And I wouldn't make too much of that because obviously they're neighbors with China. There's a lot of back and forth from a trade standpoint with China between India. And so I think that there's goodness in engaging India for the two reasons that you and I are talking about. And but it's real politic, right? It's what is in the best interest of the United States. There's no real humanitarian angle here. There's no real utopian nirvana kind of thing happening. It's what's in the best interest of the United States. What are our vital interests? Our national defense strategy says China's our number one competitor, and so we can leverage a relationship with India to enhance our national defense strategy. That is a real bare bones bottom line.
Now, if President Biden is smart enough to ask for your advice, where do you see the biggest opportunity to build on both of those areas? Should you give him advice?
Yeah. So what I think Secretary Austin is engaging the MOD there, the Ministry of Defense, and I would say do more of that and sign whatever defense deals that we can lock them down on. I know that they're engaging U.S. Defense companies and for equipment. The more that we can get our equipment in their hands, it keeps them away from sort of the China-Russia models of equipment. And so I would that's a huge market there, and for our military industrial complex, which seems to be thriving right now, right? And so I would advise the president to continue to diplomatically engage India in efforts to deter China and to supply them from a foreign military sales perspective as many arms that are NATO variants as we can, and that the more they look like us, the more they act like us. Lots of training missions, joint exercises, all the things. So we have a lot of tools in the kit bag from a military perspective to avoid war. We can employ and deploy soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines in that region and do joint exercises with the Indian military. We already do exchanges with Indian military officers in our schools so that they they see what our professional military education system is like, and all of those things are good things that are happening between the United States and India. And I would say just continue to do more. Now they have 5 or 6 major corporations there, and I might if we had I used to go to the deputies meetings there, and I'm when I was the under, and I might work with my Treasury and Commerce peers and say, look, let's put together a team to engage these major corporations in India and see if we can't enhance trade and begin those kinds of bilateral ties also, and work our small businesses, our private military contractors, our manufacturers, and all of that into the picture to help them sell to India, and that way you just continue to strengthen, and you don't have a single point of failure. So military, commerce, two-step.
Yeah. And, General, it's interesting. So many people would say, well, that's part of the problem, that we continue to feed the military-industrial complex. And my counter, and it's not that I'm pro this Raytheon or any of these people. It's just that I realize there's a way that this game is played, and that's a key factor of how you play this game. If you don't have the military-industrial complex, you don't have to go to war, but everybody has to be able to defend themselves, and everybody wants their gun, right? So, if everybody has a gun, less people are using guns. At least this is my, again, rudimentary philosophy. So I think it's important to allow that trade, because there's always, criticism of selling to the Saudis and selling to this one. But ultimately, this is the currency that we trade in when you are the United States. True or false?
True. Remember, Reagan said peace through strength.
Right.
Teddy Roosevelt said, speak softly, carry a big stick. That big stick was the Navy in his mind. So, you can just be super humble, but have a big aircraft carrier off the coast and say,
right,
look, let's talk. And I know when I was the deputy commanding general in Afghanistan, I was all over that country, and I would be negotiating deals to build a runway or something. And those negotiations went a lot better when I had a tank platoon behind me and an Apache helicopter above me, and I was standing on the ground talking to the Afghan businessman. Strength matters, right? That's the way the world is. So, yeah, you're absolutely right, Rich.
Yeah. All right, folks, we're on with Brigadier General Anthony Tata, U.S. Army retired. We're going to continue our conversation with him. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And I want to switch gears and go over to Europe because, for months, there's been all of this talk, right? And I've been critical. I've been critical of many who I've called pro-Putin patriots, right? They love America, but they love Putin too. And I for whatever it is, I cannot get into Putin. And of course, the criticism comes back on me saying that I'm a Nazi lover. I'm not a Nazi lover. I just think that Ukraine has a right to defend itself and Russia should stop trying to encroach. That's my personal opinion, and I'm sticking with it. And I also feel that Putin is just not a good guy, in my opinion, not a good guy. And that doesn't mean that there's a false equivalency here, right? Doesn't mean I'm saying Zelensky's a great guy. I'm not saying that either. I'm just saying this is a tough situation, and I think you got to look at it as such. And one thing I do know, in so much as I know from my observations of this, is that there was the Budapest Memorandum of Security Assurances that said that we were going to defend Ukraine if they gave up their nukes, which is probably the silliest thing that they ever did. But anyway, I think, if you're the United States, you've got to stand by that. You can't just say, hey, give up your weapons, and then, hey, by the way, we're going to sell you out to dry when Putin comes knocking at your door. So there's been a lot of back and forth on this. And then comes the Wagner Group, right? And there's a Nazi group, and there's this, and there's that, and there's all sorts of crazy. And now they were working with the Russians, and now they're working against the Russians. A whole lot of crazy stuff is happening. General Anthony Tata, former Undersecretary for Policy at DOD, welcome back. Help us make sense of all of this.
Yeah. So, Rich, what we have going on right now is Wagner, apparently, if it's not some massive information operation, which is entirely possible, right, turning its guns on the Russian army headquarters because the Russian army and military supposedly did a few bombing runs on Wagner positions in Ukraine. And so
now, let me just ask, why would you hire mercenaries and then bomb them?
Well, A, it could have been a legit mistake because fratricide happens all the time. B, Prigozhin has been the head of Wagner has been very critical of the Russian army chain of command. They didn't get supplies to his troops. Wagner's probably 40, 50,000 troops, right? It's a private army that's the size bigger than most countries' armies, and so this is not just some band of Blackwater employees riding around in a Humvee or an SUV. This is a legit army, and so when you think about it, they're a major force in the northern part of the front in this fight with Ukraine. And so when the air to ground coordination is always challenging, where the pilots knowing where the front lines are. So whenever I hear these stories, because I've seen it in combat, it could be a legit mistake the pilot made, and it could be fratricide, or it could be spiteful Russian generals back in Moscow, eating donuts and laughing and saying, take out Prigozhin and these Wagner guys. And I suspect that Wagner and Prigozhin have some intel because he's marching on Moscow right now, if you believe everything that we're seeing. And
right.
One of the things I think we've all learned, Rich, is, the first report is always wrong. Let's wait and see what's happening. And but it's an interesting development in this whole scenario, because remember 18 months ago, people were saying, the billionaires are going to take out Putin. And so maybe that's happening. Yeah, right, exactly.
Who knows what's going on? General, thank you for being with us. Folks, follow him at AJ Tata, Tata, on Twitter. And General, I want to thank you for being with us. It's always a pleasure. I appreciate your analysis. Godspeed, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Rich.
You bet. All right, folks, more to come straight ahead. We're going to discuss, well, I'll tell you when we get there.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. Richie V here with you. And I want to talk about something crazy. There's this statistic I was just looking at during the break. Listen to this. California accounts for 13% of the United States population. So 13% of Americans live in California. Yet, when it comes to homeless people, it accounts for 33%. A third of all homelessness comes out of California. Now, I think this is absolutely insane. But it's a problem. Now, you add to the fact that the homeless problem isn't really even a homeless problem. It's a mental health problem. And now we've got a really big conundrum. So I want to get to the bottom of this and to discuss this phantom national homeless crisis with Lawrence McQuillan. I hope I said that right. Senior fellow at and director at the Center for Entrepreneurial Innovation. Welcome, sir.
Nice to be with you, Rich.
Likewise. Now, this is something I didn't know anything about. About a year ago, I spoke with somebody who was a former head of the Department of Homeless Services for, I think it was the city of New York, and it was a staggering conversation that I had because I had no idea how in-depth this problem was. And then when I see a statistic like the one I just saw, I said, oh my gosh, this is like a really, really big problem. Let's talk about this a little bit, right? Because I think this is a big problem that's A, overlooked, and B, not being treated.
Yeah, well, another statistic that you didn't mention that really points to the problem in California is that half of all unsheltered homeless in America are in California.
Wow.
As you mentioned, 33% of homeless overall, but half of all unsheltered homeless that live on the streets and sidewalks and parks and that sort of thing are in California. So California truly is the epicenter of this problem in America. 7 of the 11 cities with the greatest number of homeless people are all in California. 7 of 11.
Wow.
So it really is
Are the rest in New York?
Concentrated problem. Say again?
Are the rest of them in New York?
Yeah, a lot of them are in New York, Seattle, San Jose.
Oh, yeah, Seattle, sure.
Phoenix has a big problem. Even metropolitan Denver also is up there near the top of the list. So
is that a new problem in metropolitan Denver, or is it a decades-old problem?
No, I think most of these are decades old, but growing. So they may have started out as a fairly manageable problem, which it is in most parts of the country. I mean, they'll have, for example, there's the Department of Housing and Urban Development divides the country into 387 what they call continuums of care, where they coordinate care regionally. And of those 387, about 2/3 have fewer than 1,000 homeless, and 84% of these have fewer than 2,000 homeless. So in most parts of the country, it's a very manageable problem, but there's these pockets of just explosive growth in homelessness where they take over vast parts of the city, entire neighborhoods, and they become, basically unlivable for other people. And that's really where you see, huge concentrations. And so I don't call it really a national crisis, but it certainly is a regional or local crisis in some of these cities.
Yeah, well, it seems like, at least if nothing else, it's a statewide crisis in California. So let's talk about why they're missing the mark here. What did they do? I know in New York City, for example, there were certain mayoral administrations that had a focus on mental health, and then others that, provided lip service on mental health. But what ended up happening was they closed down and didn't provide any funding for mental health facilities. And what ended up happening was that there were a limited number of shelters, and those began to dwindle, and there was no care for those that were schizophrenic. So it became a bigger and bigger problem, and voila, here you are. Is that similar to what's happening in California, or is it something totally different?
No, it's similar. I mean, what the problem is that California and other cities where you've seen this explosive growth of homelessness is that they really misdiagnosed the problem as one of insufficient housing. So they pour billions and billions of dollars into trying to provide a permanent roof over every homeless person's head. And it's really a fool's errand because, number one, it's too expensive. You just can't do it, especially in California where it's so expensive to build anything. And then number two is that even if you provide a roof over somebody's head, it's usually temporary because they just cycle in and out of these housing situations because you haven't dealt with the underlying cause of their problem, which, as you mentioned, is mental health problems or substance abuse problems. So until you, go after those core root causes of homelessness, you're never going to actually slow this problem down. And that's what we're seeing in California is that They're misdiagnosing it. They're pouring way too much money into housing, not enough into treatment and other facilities for mental health care. And as a result, people are going there. But there's other reasons too, in that California is subsidizing the problem by many of the cities pay homeless people. For example, in San Francisco, if you live there just 1 month, you qualify for up to $1,000 a month of cash assistance in San Francisco. So it becomes,
it's almost incentivizing homelessness.
Yeah, exactly. You're subsidizing counterproductive behavior because a lot of times that money is used to buy drugs and alcohol. So it's really, you're becoming a magnet for the problem. So you're drawing people to the area. And then you're also just allowing, in San Francisco's case, in Los Angeles too, the people to live their lifestyle wherever they want, in sidewalks and alleys and in parks. So you're not confining them to certain areas where they can access the care and treatment that they need. And they make some of these neighborhoods just unlivable for regular folk.
It's horrible. Folks, we're on with Lawrence McQuillan. He's a senior fellow and director of the Center on Entrepreneurial Innovation. We're going to get to your calls and more with him straight ahead. 833-4-VALDEZ is the phone number, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. We're discussing the homelessness crisis in California and how that spills over into other states and how every other respective state has their own issue. Our guest is Lawrence McQuillan. He's a senior fellow and director at the Center for Entrepreneurial Innovation. And this is an interesting conversation because I think you hit the nail on the head, Lawrence, when you said that they've misdiagnosed the problem and they're throwing money at housing, which is expensive enough in California, and they should really be throwing it at mental health. Let's pick up where you left off.
Right. I mean, that's absolutely true because, the root causes of the problem are people that have untreated personal trauma that manifests itself in mental health issues and substance abuse issues. And as a result, if you don't go after those problems, you're never going to get a handle on the situation. And if you subsidize the problem and make your city a magnet for people to come there, that's also going to exacerbate the problem because you're never going to get a handle on it and get ahead of it. So one of the programs that I particularly like is one in San Antonio, Texas, called Haven for Hope, which opened in 2010, and it's really a one-stop shop for where people can be taken to in order to get treatment or at least get them off the streets to a safer situation that's a more dignified living situation. But it's a campus-style facility. It has like one portal, one entry point where they take down your information and they immediately know how to connect you with services if you want to. There's a low barrier emergency shelter where anybody can go and stay there. They have meals, showers, toilets, laundry facility, medical care, that sort of thing. Everybody is welcome there. And then if you're ever ready to enter treatment, you just knock on the door or ring the bell, and you can immediately be partnered with all of these great organizations that are there right on site that can provide, either substance abuse treatment or mental health treatment for you. And there's a real ladder set up of not only services, but also housing. So as you progress through the treatment and become, more self-sufficient and independent, your housing options become better. So it's a fabulous program. It's really reduced homelessness in San Antonio, for example. Since it opened, homelessness in San Antonio went down about 11%, whereas in San Francisco, it exploded by 80%.
Whoa. Well, I want to pause right there really quick, Lawrence, and I want to go to Maggie. She's a caller calling in from Nevada City, California on KNCO. Maggie, welcome. You're on with Lawrence McQuillan and Rich Valdez. Go right ahead.
Good evening, you guys.
Hi.
So I'm calling in regarding your caller discussing homelessness and how it's all a mental health problem or a drug problem.
Do you disagree?
And absolutely.
What's your thought?
From my perspective, it's 100% propaganda.
So you're saying that there are no homeless people?
No, what I'm saying is the only reason you guys are getting away with saying it's a mental health issue or a drug issue is because those are the homeless people you see. Okay?
Right.
The homeless people you don't notice are the people like me.
Tell us about it.
I have been homeless for 5 years and 8 months now.
I'm sorry.
Oh, me too, honey. And it's because I'm a senior citizen on Social Security and for no other reason. My Social Security check is not enough to cover rent on even a studio apartment. Okay, and then
so it's financial.
I have to pay utilities.
You're saying you're being priced out of the market in California.
I am 100% priced, not just in California, because I believe life is an intelligence test. So I have searched everywhere. And there really is almost nowhere in the country that I can afford rent, utilities, and groceries.
On your current Social Security income?
On my current Social Security benefits.
Right. And I'm sure that's an issue for a lot of seniors. I know, listen, my dad wasn't homeless, thank God. But he in his final years, he had a little bit of money in the bank, but he didn't have any other pension besides Social Security. He did, but it ran out. And then eventually when he passed away, they sent him a bunch of money that said, oh, we forgot to send you this. But my point is, he was in that boat, and he lived a very, very fixed income kind of lifestyle. And of course, I was with him, till the very end. But I realized if you don't have family and you don't have that support system, it could be very, very challenging. So I definitely empathize with where you're coming from, and I think you raise an interesting point that there is a real issue with the cost of housing in certain areas that contributes to it. I don't know what percentage, but it makes a lot of sense to me. Thank you, Maggie, for your call. I appreciate it. I want to give Lawrence McQuillan a couple of minutes before we take our break to respond.
Well, I think, point well taken that there are people in situations where there are programs that try to relocate people to areas of the country where their cost of living is much less and they can live on the income that they have. There's also, there's food stamps, there's general assistance that people can look into, as well as Social Security and disability benefits. So I would, just encourage people to think about, if you can't afford the area you live in, to think about, reconnecting with family or friends in other locations of the country where it would be, a better fit for you given your income and the cost of living.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and probably easier said than done. Thank you, Maggie, for your call. Thank you, Lawrence. Stick around. We're coming right back. 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. 833-4Valdez. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4Valdez. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, welcome back. Again, I want to thank Maggie from KNCO in California for calling in and sharing her story. It was a moving story, and it really adds a lot of context and a lot of humanity to what we're discussing, which can sometimes fall flat, right? You talk about things, and it's just numbers and statistics, and we don't realize, or we forget that these are people. At least, sometimes I think I can forget. Maybe the rest of us don't, but I know I am fallible that way. Our guest is Lawrence McQuillan, Senior Fellow at the Independent Institute, author of California Dreamin'. Lawrence, we have about a minute and a half to go. I want you to let everybody know your final thoughts and how they could keep up to speed with the work that you do at the Independent Institute.
Well, I think that was a very important point you made there at the end. I mean, just one case of homelessness is one case too many. It's tragic and it's complicated, and everybody has a unique story and situation in terms of how they got into experiencing homelessness. So I think it's important that we have a very customized, personalized approach to dealing with each individual, and that's what places like Haven for Hope in San Antonio do so well. I mean, they really individualize the care for each person. But in terms of finding our research, it's on, especially on homelessness, it's on independent.org, and we have a study called Beyond Homeless, and also a documentary with the same title, I believe, that's also on homelessness. It's a short, 30-minute documentary for people to watch and get informed about the situation not only in San Francisco, but the great hope in San Antonio with their program there. So independent.org is where you can reach me and also our research and work on homelessness.
Outstanding. Well, I want to thank you. We're going to continue our discussion on homelessness. Lawrence McQuillan, I want to thank you. At this point, we're going to switch gears to our open phone segment, but Godspeed to you. Keep up the great work, and we appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much, Rich.
Yes, sir. You bet. All right, folks, I see the calls are lining up. Lots of people want to weigh in on this topic of homelessness, and I think it's important, and I'm glad so many people care. So we're going to do that, 833-4Valdez. We'll take, let me see, I'm going to get to one call before we're able to take our pause. Let's go to Steve in Atlanta, Georgia, WGKA. Steve, go right ahead.
Hey, Rich, thanks for taking my call. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
So I'm going to get in touch with this guy, Mr. How do you spell his last name?
McQuillan. When you're off, don't hang up.
Okay,
and
Quillin.
Count the Lacula will give it to you.
Yeah. So anyway, here I live in Atlanta, and I live in a 5-bedroom house, and I rent out 4 rooms. The girls are gone now, and I rent out 4 rooms, and I make a habit of taking in people. Because I've learned renting rooms all my life that older people who are on Social Security or on fixed income,
senior citizens, right, fixed incomes, and that's a great way, right, to kind of meet the need that's out there, like we saw with Maggie calling in, that there are people that have a fixed income, and if there's a will, there's a way. And I love this idea that you're doing, Steve. Thank you. Stick around. I'll try and get back to you because the music kicked in and we have to take a quick pause. I'm Rich Valdez. It's America at Night. Open Phone America starts right now. Don't go anywhere.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, by the way, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Our telephone number, if you want to join the conversation, 833-482-5537, 833-4Valdez. It's the Friday night edition of the program, Happy to be with you. We're live. We're national. We're taking your calls. I see there's a bunch of calls right now. We're going to get to you momentarily. We've been talking about homelessness for the last half hour, and we've got calls from Montana, from Kansas, from Georgia, Michigan, and our buddy in the Philippines. We're going to get to everybody momentarily. But I just wanted to kind of set the stage for the rest of the show tonight. I'm keeping you company till 1 a.m., and the rules are always the same, right? Anything goes. You can talk about anything you like. If you disagree with me, we move you to the front of the line to make sure that you get a chance to be heard with your gripe or your complaint, whatever and what have you. And we're going to continue with our homeless topic, but we also have these other topics that we're going to add for the rest of the hour around the graduation story where the girl ripped the mic away, plus a really crazy story that came out yesterday, maybe the day before, and it had to do with, I'm just going to share the headline with you, and then I'll get into it a little bit later. But listen to this. 4 kids found at a drag queen party with a dead trans woman's body, drugs, and sex toys in a hoarder home. That's a real one. Here's another one. Boston police find 4 children in southern Boston apartment with dead body, drugs, and sex toys. Kids are now in state custody. This is a story that happened a few days ago, this week. And it's just incredible that this is what's going on. So we're going to talk about that as well. Plus, I have a story that I've been wanting to share with you, and I got to get to it before the week is over, of my kids' graduation. It's something that happened toward the end of the year that I want your opinion on as well. But feel free to give us a call, 833-4-VALDEZ. We're going to jump into these calls right now. We were on with Steve right before we took a break, and we'd gotten a caller from one of our listeners in California who shared that she was homeless, Maggie, and that it was because of financial issues, and she'd been priced out of the housing market because she lives on a fixed income. She's a senior citizen and lives on her Social Security income. And this is a difficult thing, but Steve called in with a solution, at least in so much as what he can do in his situation to help. Steve, go right ahead.
Hey, Valdez, thanks for holding me over. So
go ahead. Tell us what you do.
I learned a little while back that don't, and I hate to say it, but don't rent to couples and don't rent to young people. So over time, I sort of migrated to doing nothing but old people who are on fixed incomes. They're very grateful for the housing. It's a nice house. It's very well decorated. It's beautiful. And they have an opportunity to live here, like here in Atlanta where I live. I mean, what I charge $540, now it's $560. But it goes up a little bit depending on how whatever. But I just find them so grateful, and also I enjoy them. I really enjoy them. They bring so much character into the home, and I love my relationship with every one of them. And on top of that,
Steve, let me just add real quick on that one.
4 homeless people.
I absolutely love talking to senior citizens as well. I don't know why. I just find them to be so knowledgeable, so experienced. They have stories for days. They lived a part of life that you've never lived. They're like walking history books, and you can learn so much from them. Go ahead.
Yeah, and they're so kind too, and helpful. Like Patty, for instance, she's 74. And she's still moving around and she walks my dogs every day, takes out a rent. She takes care of my cats every day, takes out a rent. And then she tries to help out with anything and everything I want or need. She takes care of it. And you can't get that with somebody who's hustling and bustling as a young person. But these older people, they're so willing and able and capable and willing,
Right. And you know what I love? That you actually do this for them, that this is something that you do where you have 4 rooms in your 5-bedroom house that you rent out pretty much exclusively to senior citizens on fixed incomes. I think that's such a great thing to do because, maybe you knew it, but now we all know it, that you're doing your part in making sure that they're not homeless. And I think that's a good thing. Anyway, Steve, thanks for the call. I appreciate it. We will continue with, let's see, where do we go from here? Let's go to Gil. Gil, you know what? The other day, Gil is in Manila, Philippines, listening online, Rich Valdez, AmericaAtNight.com. And Gil, the other day, I was scrolling through social media, through the people that, say mean things to me, like, I can't stand you, blah, blah, blah. And then the people that say nice things about me, and I love that. But one person said, why haven't I heard Gil call into your show? What's going on? So you've got your own fans here on the show. Gil, go right ahead.
I don't know if I'll have any fans left after tonight, but first of all, one of the reasons I'm here is because it costs about a third to live here compared to most places in the U.S. That's not California. It costs a lot. It would be a lot more in California. Just one example, we have a 4-bedroom house in a kind of a suburb of Manila. Cost me $170 a month for rent.
Wow.
And our landlord is great. He takes good care of us, and he's a real stand-up guy. But we were lucky to find it. I mean, you just don't come to a foreign country and set up housekeeping without knowing what's going on. I had been here working for several years before I retired, so I knew what was life was like here and what to expect. Lots of people come and they're disappointed. But anyhow.
Now, when are you due in the U.S.?
What did I do in the U.S.?
No, when are you due to arrive?
When do I do to arrive? Well, we changed our arrangement October 1.
Okay, you're coming in the fall. Gotcha.
It's going to work out. It's going to work out better for the family, bringing my wife and daughter.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to connecting with you when you do arrive, because it's always a pleasure to chat with you. Gil in Manila, Philippines. Thank you, Gil. I appreciate it. We're going to continue with the rest of your calls and more straight ahead. 833-4-VALDES. 833, the number 4, and my last name, VALDES.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, that chant, I don't know if you heard it. It said, we're here, we're queer, and we're coming for your children. Now, that was at a Pride event this week. And my thought to that was, why on earth would hundreds of people celebrating Pride, LGBTQ plus Pride, shout, we're here, we're queer, we're coming for your children? Play it again, please. I don't know if that was, to irk people, or I don't care what you are. If you say you're an astronaut and you're coming for my children, I've got a problem with that too. Right? I think every parent is going to have a problem when you say I'm coming for your children. Nobody should be coming for anybody's children, period. That's not a thing. Don't come at people's children. You're going to find the worst in that person. I don't understand this. If anybody knows about this and wants to explain why on earth they would chant this in unison with hundreds of people gathered, but it doesn't help. It doesn't help at all when you have stories like this one that just came out. Listen to this. And we're going to get back to your calls on homelessness and everything else, but I want you to hear this story. This is the Daily Mail. It's reported all over the place, though. 4 kids aged between 5 years old and 10 years old taken into state care after being found at a drag queen party with a dead trans woman's body on the floor and drugs and sex toys scattered throughout a hoarder home. Fire officials found 4 children jammed together in a cramped room, surrounded by filth and the stench of death permeating the air. The children were reportedly being hidden in a back room by men dressed in women's clothing who were uncooperative and denied having children inside the home. A transgender black woman was pronounced dead at the scene, according to a police report. 4 kids, again, aged 5 to 10 years old. Emergency services found the unidentified woman's body after an unconscious person report was made at 11 a.m. on Saturday morning. They reportedly found 6 adults who appeared to be men dressed as women inside the home, who were uncooperative and denied having any children in the home. The children were found jammed together in a cramped room, surrounded by filth and stenchy air, hidden by the men that were wearing wigs. City Council Erin Murphy told NBC News that the partygoers attempted to stop a responding firefighter from finding the kids. When he opened the door, he saw 4 children, what I believe were 2 adults in the back room. And it was really disturbing, Murphy told NBC. They just seemed scared. Boston police are classifying the incident as a death investigation resulting from cardiac arrest, and no arrests have been made as of Wednesday. So I'm guessing if there were drugs in a dead person and a cardiac arrest, again, I'm not the coroner, but I'm going to guess somebody took drugs and overdosed. And why they had children and sex toys there, that's the $64 million question. Now, it said there was a lot of hoarding going on. It was a very unclean apartment, lots of sex toys and drug paraphernalia all over the place. The children were immediately removed from the hazardous environment and transferred to the care of State Protective Services, where medical professionals assess their medical condition. It's unclear what the relationship between these adults and the children found in the apartment was. According to the police report, alcohol and drug consumption was not suspected. However, the dead body, okay, so I was wrong. The dead body was transported to the medical examiner's office, blah, 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 blah. It's not currently known what caused the woman's death. This is sickening, said council person Michael Flaherty to the Boston Herald. I was informed by people at the scene that there were drugs, alcohol, sex toys all around, as well as a dead body on the floor. Flaherty told the Herald the woman found on the floor had died from an apparent overdose, and that a man wearing a wig claiming to be the father of the kids was found in the back room. All right, so now it's a conflicting report within the report. They're saying one is an overdose, the other one's saying maybe that was the initial response. I don't know. Neighbors told NBC News it was traumatic. I can't get it out of my head. Nobody else who could if you saw that. I don't know what transpired there. It's very uncomfortable and unsafe. So a bunch of kids, nobody knows why these little kids, again, these are not teenagers that were getting high with a bunch of drag queens. No, these are 5 to 10 years old. Let that sink in. Absolutely crazy. This is absolutely crazy to me. Police say the Massachusetts Department of Children and Families was called due to the apartment's condition, and they are investigating the incident. Unbelievable. So the councilman made the assessment that he thought it was an overdose, just like I did, given that there was drug paraphernalia. But again, it hasn't been proven as of yet. Crazy, crazy stuff. Now, you might think that's where it ends. No, there's more. Not in this story, but in another one. But let me give you the phone number, 833-4-VALDEZ, 833-4-VALDEZ. I'm going to get to your calls momentarily. I just want to share this one more story with you. This is a crazy one. Former Democrat who is a transgender state representative and a shocking criminal past was just arrested on child pornography charges. What does this have to do with the other one? Nothing other than these sick people. And I'm not saying every gay person or drag queen is. I'm saying all the ones in these stories happen to be. And they have a thing for kids. And that's sick. And if you listen to the show last night when we replayed the interview with Andy Berger, she talked about how from 6 months old, she was not only abused and raped, she was trafficked. They moved her around and got money from her being raped. I mean, just absolutely astonishing. Anyway, former Democrat New Hampshire state representative who identifies as transgender was arrested Thursday for allegedly distributing sexually explicit images of children. The biological male known as Stacey Marie Lawton identifies as female, was initially elected to the New Hampshire state legislature in 2012, unable to serve due to being on probation for a 2008 felony conviction of credit card fraud. The former Democrat representative was faced with several charges, blah, 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 blah. I mean, there's just a slew of things here. Anyway, and then we see the picture. I'm going to tweet this out so you can see it. This is insane. And anybody who wants to play along with this little game that people are playing where they say that this is okay for this stuff to happen, this, they're wrong. When they start chanting, we're here, we're queer, we're coming for your children, that has to stop. Somebody's got to put an end to that. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us. Anyway, I want to get to your calls very quickly here. Let's see. Where do we go? Let's see. George, Topeka, Kansas, KMAJ. George, go right ahead.
How are you, sir?
Wonderful. Thanks. What's your initial reaction to the story I just shared with you on the kids being found around that dead body?
Pride comes before the fall.
Yeah. Well said, George. Now, I know you wanted to talk about your endeavors with homeless people. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I'll try to be quick here. One quick thing, kick back to, I believe it was Steve, the man that owns the rental properties in Atlanta.
Yeah.
While I do agree with most of his points, the one thing I do disagree with is if he's not going to rent to younger couples, they're just going to turn into bitter old people. So it's a little bit short-sighted to only, go after the fixed income, older generation. As a business move, I'm sure it's more savvy. But
what's your interaction with homeless people?
So I'm just middle class. I own a small painting business. Family man. My shop is in a part of town. We have a lot of homeless people in the city, and I feel like we can't paint them with such a broad brush. And I hate to use the word them, but what I feel like what a lot happens. One main factor is methamphetamines.
Yeah,
I run into all the time. I've been there 2 years now. At first, it was prostitution, methamphetamines, beggars, or thieves. That's all I dealt with. And then over time, people started realizing, okay, he's not going to just give me, he's not interested in this. So it became
George,
a thing
I got to
where...
run. The music means we got to go, but I appreciate it. Hopefully we'll get a chance to talk again soon. Folks, continue with you straight ahead. 833-4-VALDEZ. We will be right back.
Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, everybody. So welcome back. I want to talk about graduation a little bit, and we'll continue our discussions with homelessness and all of that. But I want to talk about everything under the sun. But I want to zone in particular on graduations, right? There was a story earlier this week out of Philly. Big shout out to Philly. And I thought it was uncalled for. A young lady receives her degree and did a dance. And apparently they were warned, if you do any type of dance on the way to receive your diploma, you'll be reprimanded or you won't get it or something like that, or whatever, what have you. But she did this dance, and apparently it was a cultural thing. And they, when she put her hand out to receive her degree, when her name was called, they didn't give it to her. Now, I thought to myself, I think that's a stupid rule. I see people do things like this all the time. They strut, they move here, they move there, they blow kisses, they take a bow. People do their graduation walk. Like, who are you to police these people? I mean, really, they earned the degree. Yeah, you can't. How much control are we going to have over people? I don't know. And I just thought, if that was my kid, oh boy. Anyway, here's the news report.
She stole that moment from me. I will never get that again.
Hafsa Abdur Rahman cried tears of humiliation instead of joy at her high school graduation on June 9th. The 17-year-old says the principal warned students their families could not cheer or clap when they walk on stage.
And I understood the rules, so I was telling in the video, I'm like, do not say nothing because I want my diploma. I knew and understood what we were supposed to do.
In this video, you can see Abdur Rahman dance across the stage and then hear the response from the crowd. She says because they laughed, the principal told her she could not receive her diploma.
If they thought that I shouldn't do the gritty across the stage and do the Girls High traditions, nobody should have been able to wave or blow kisses or do period signs because I feel like that's the same thing. So I just thought it was really unfair.
Abdur Rahman says she's not alone. 3 other girls did not get their diplomas on stage, but all of them did after the ceremony. The school district of Philadelphia said in a statement, quote, "The district does not condone the withholding of earned diplomas based on family members cheering for their graduates. We apologize to all the families and graduates who were impacted and are further looking into this matter to avoid it happening in the future." Although Abdur Rahman wishes she had a better experience, she and her mother hope school leaders learned a valuable lesson.
It's 2023. A lot has happened. These girls went through COVID together. I understand traditions and rules are set, in place for a reason, and we're not saying that they should be broken, but it might need to be revised also.
I saw this video, and honestly, it broke my heart. I thought, unbelievable. Who are these academic administrators that this girl very innocently, happily took her thing? She understood that her family couldn't make noise, so they tell their family, you can't clap for me. How crazy is that? I just want you to say, half the reason I have a sore throat right now is because I was screaming like a savage beast at my daughter's graduation. That's what I do. I go hard, right? I represent for my family. And I just... I can't believe that we're not allowed to celebrate the successes of our children, and that she did. And again, you can't see the video, so you lose a lot of context in a report like that. But I got to say, this girl did a very innocent. There was nothing crazy. It was some sort of cultural thing with her family traditions. It was about 6 or 7 seconds worth of she didn't stop anything. She didn't interrupt anything. It was on her way to get the diploma. And then they dissed her and didn't give her the diploma. I think it's absolutely insane. Now, I bring this up because my kid had a graduation this week. But last week, she decided to join 25 of her peers in the senior prank. And this is where I know the lines are full, but give us a call. I really want your opinion on this as well. So my kid, who's not too, apple didn't fall far from the tree, like they say. I was a wise guy in high school. She joins this 5th period walkout. They walk out. They went into their cars. It was just seniors. And they drove around the school honking their horns as part of their senior prank. The school took exception to this and reprimanded them, which they should, right? I mean, you pay the price for senior pranks. Although senior cut day, when I was a senior, nobody got in trouble for that. But irrespective, you do the crime, you got to do the time. I get that. But what's interesting here is if you cut a full day of school, you don't get suspended or anything. You get detention. And they call your parents and they're like, hey, you didn't show up at school. But cutting after 5th period, you're never going to guess what they got. You think they got a note sent home. You think they got maybe half a day of in-school suspension or detention for 2 days or 3 days or a week of detention. No, it wasn't that. It wasn't 2 days of in-school suspension or 3 days of in-school suspension. It was not a full day of out-of-school suspension. It wasn't 2 days of out-of-school suspension. It was 3 days of out-of-school suspension during finals week. The school decided to suspend my kid and 24 other kids for what they called in a letter sent to me for group cutting. Now, listen, I think hold them accountable, yes. A 3-day suspension is what you get for fist fighting at school. I'm not that old, right? I don't know. You let me know, am I overreacting because it's my kid, or are they overreacting because these kids played a simple prank? Let me know. 833-4-VALDEZ, 833-4-VALDEZ. Taking your calls on that and everything else straight ahead.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4 4Valdez. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4Valdez. That's Valdez with an S. He's brown, he's bald, and he's breaking it down. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. Let's get to these calls. We got lots of people. We're going to do the speed around here. Keep it really quick so everybody gets a turn. Let's go to Lansing, Michigan, WILS. Ken, go right ahead quickly.
Good evening, great show. I heard you say something about we're here, we're queer, and we're coming after your children. You know, as adults, I don't give a damn what adults do inside your house. That's your business. But when you parade down streets and say that you're coming after my children, you have crossed the line, and whatever happens to you happens to you if you ever come near my children. I'm just going to put it that way.
Yep, at your own risk. I'm with you, Ken. I got your back on that one, 100%. I can't think of a law in the world where you're not allowed to defend your children. That's absolute insanity, and I'm glad that nobody took it the wrong way that day and took it to another level, because I was incensed watching that stuff. Anyway, thank you, Ken. I appreciate it. Thanks for listening to the show, and thanks for the compliment. Let us continue. Let's see, where do we go? The next part of the country we visit is Pittsburgh, one of our favorites, KDKA. Diana, go right ahead.
Hi, I just have a question. When I was listening, I heard a 74-year-old woman who was homeless, not enough money on Social Security, and it crossed my mind, and I know there's a lot of people out there that have psychological issues, but like, where are the families? Where do you have brothers? Do you have sisters? Do you have cousins? I don't.
I think I agree with you. I think part of what happens is, and I could tell you, my dad died at 80 years old, and he died with his family, with me. But I can tell you that my dad's one of 12 siblings, and he hadn't been in touch with them in years. I mean, many years. So I know that people, especially as they get older, they die. Family members die. They become kind of, disparate, if you will, and they become estranged. And lamentably, that's how it goes sometimes, and it's very unfortunate. And it really this opened my eyes to a bigger problem. Thank you so much for the call, Diana. Big shout out to everybody in Pittsburgh on KDKA. Love that. Let us continue. Let's go to Joe, Lake of the Ozarks, Missouri, KRMS. Go right ahead quickly.
Thank you. I will try to do this quickly. But as far as homelessness goes, because I've heard different comments over the years, not everybody is homeless because they're deadbeats. Not everybody who is homeless is a bad person. Many years ago, I worked for a large company whose name shall remain nameless.
Yeah.
But my job with this company was asset protection. And I had been sent into this particular location because they had a $250,000 shrink and they couldn't figure out why. So it was my job to protect the assets of the company. And in doing so, I realized that in the tree line behind this company, there was a homeless camp.
Wow. And that you were their go-to.
Well, as it turns out, and this was back in the early 90s, I probably should have been more concerned, but back in the day when I was much younger, I was fearless. And so I marched my happy little self back there. And I'm here to tell you, my takeaway from them was I felt honored and humbled. They quickly cleaned a milk crate for me to sit on. They offered me coffee, and what I always have prayed was a clean soup can. But I took their coffee. I sat. I got to know them. They were African-American Vietnam veterans.
Wow. Let me share with you, Joe. Once, this is a true story. I was running late to get home. I was leaving my job in Manhattan, and I wanted to get on the bus. And I think at the time the bus was $1 or $2 or $3. It was something and 75 cents. And I remembered, so I put my hand in my pocket, and I was 1, 2, 3. And I thought I had 3 quarters, but it ended up having like a quarter, a dime, and a nickel. And so I was short. And I was like, damn, if I run to the ATM, I'll lose my spot in line. And I was like, I'm going to make a plea to the bus driver and just tell him, sorry, man, I thought I had $0.75. I'll give it to you tomorrow. It's whatever. It's a couple of cents. But a guy comes up to me with a cup, homeless guy, and he's like, hey, do you have any spare change? And I said, bro, I wish I had spare change. I'm short. I can't even get on the bus. And he was like, oh, really? And he put his hand inside his cup, and he gave me what I needed to get on the bus. And I was like, you don't have to do that. I'm sure this guy will let me on. He was like, no, man. He's like, right now, you need it more than me. And I was like, oh, my gosh, what a good guy. And I said, if I ever see you again, I'm going to take care of you. I didn't ever see him again, and I wished I could have. But the next homeless person I found, I did everything I could to help him. But you're right. Just because you're homeless doesn't make you a degenerate in any way. Most of these people are great people that are just, fell out of luck or got into addiction or have undiagnosed mental health issues. And it's really unfortunate. Thank you for the call, Joe. I appreciate it. I'm going to keep it moving. Let's go to Matt, Morehead City, North Carolina, WTKF. Go right ahead.
Hello, Rich. Nice to talk to you again.
Yes, sir.
I'm 80 miles north of there. That's the matter. To get right to the point, Stephen in Atlanta, I heard while I was on hold, he's doing the right thing. I don't care who wants to denigrate him. I've always been a fan of Gil in the Philippines.
Yeah.
He's got a fan right here. My point is, I could fix most of America's problems. It's not easy. It starts like this, and I end it. Throw the entire Biden crime family out of the White House, including the vice president. There's a good start. And if Trump stops attacking his enemies to talk about what he's going to do, he's a shoo-in. I hope he hears me right now.
I agree with you. I think it's a great start. I hope that we can continue on that line. There's been a lot of controversy with the impeachment stuff because some saying it's extra constitutional and they're just going outside of the committee work that they should be doing. But I think the goal is right, even if the way we're getting there is wrong. And hopefully we can straighten that out very quickly. But yeah, getting rid of Biden, definitely a step in the right direction. Thank you, my brother. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Let us continue here. Let me see. Where do I want to go? Linda, Albany, New York, WGDJ. Go right ahead.
Oh, thanks for taking my call. Yes, the discipline was way too much, and it's too bad in a way they couldn't have turned the prank around and, let's say, announced that maybe they collected X number of pounds of clothes, for instance, for a homeless person. Done something really positive.
You're right. You're right. And listen, I was the first one to say, I think the prank was silly and it was dumb. But again, these are high school kids. And, they were trying to do something silly with their senior prank. So I get it. They should have paid the price. But I agree with you. I think 3 days of out-of-school suspension during finals week where they had to come back and take their finals on different days because they were busy being suspended, which even out-of-school suspension as a discipline, I think is really not a great reprimand, right? It's like, hey, you did bad. We're going to let you stay home and sleep late and whatever. It's just, it doesn't make sense. But thank you, Linda. I appreciate it. We're going to continue with the rest of your calls. Let us go over here. Where do we go? Let's go to Steve, Cleveland, Ohio, WEOL. Go right ahead.
Hey, Rich. Easy listening to the night. Friday. Did a good job this week. So
thank you, brother.
Made it to the end of the week.
Thank God my voice held in there.
Here's a little different graduation. It took me 2 years to graduate because I had a mom that mom and dad just basically took care of you. And, if I would have listened to them, I could have did better. But I did okay. Went to vocation school, trade school. Yeah. And my attendance teacher, I worked in the attendance office, and my attendance teacher was my history teacher.
Okay.
And my shop teacher was my homeroom teacher. So I would write myself out from 6th to 9th period in the afternoon, and I'd get the teacher to sign it. So through the whole year, my homeroom teacher asking me, are you going to be here in the afternoon? Yes, sir. I wrote myself out, and I wasn't there. So he flunked me the very last day. I'm there on the last
you got
day
caught,
pleading for please. Yeah. Well, because, I could write myself out. But the other thing was, being the school it was, 15, 16, and 17, we were allowed to smoke outside. And go figure that, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. And
everybody, let me tell you, Steve, everybody was smoking outside of my high school as well. And we had a similar thing going on. If we were late, we would get detention. However, they'd put your name on the detention list, and they would bring the detention list for attendance to the detention room. And that room would be unattended. And we figured out that if people were like sent home sick or excused for some reason, their accounting system was very simple. Your name would be crossed out on the attendance list for detention. So we figured out really early that if you're late, you could just go into the detention room, cross your name off the list, and then nobody cared if you showed up at detention or not. We did that forever until my buddy did get caught. And then he got, 2 days of in-school suspension. That was torture because you had to show up for school and be in this isolated room. That was terrible. But yeah, we did lots of crazy things in high school. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate the call. More calls from the rest of America, Arizona, Missouri, Montana, Ohio, South Carolina, coming right now.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, let's wrap this thing up. Let's go to Renee, Tucson, Arizona, KNST. Go right ahead.
Hi, Rich. I love your show. I just wanted to say a couple of things. It's Friday night, so I want to try and keep it light. About your daughter, I think you should sue the school for damages and demand a trophy for participation. And you were asking last night about how many tiers of how many tiers there are in the American legal system, and I think there are 5. One for the poor, one for the rich, one for the infinitely rich, 4 for the Republicans, and 5 for the communists.
If there's any justice at all. Excellent point. Thank you, Renee. I appreciate your kind words, and thanks for listening in Tucson, Arizona, KNST. Let us go now to Newton Falls, Ohio, WNIR. Maureen, go right ahead. Welcome.
Hi, Mr. Rich Valdez. This is Maureen. I'm calling because I was listening to the homeless issue that you were discussing, and American families are really tough on Americans, the normal people that are born here in America. And we have extended problems. Like, I came to Newton Falls to see my dad, and I wanted to live with my dad. I was in my 60s by then. And he was remarried to someone, and I couldn't do it. So I found a roommate as a veteran, and I live here in Newton Falls now. But with the part I was going to tell you is that I grew up some time of my life in Puerto Rico. And my dad was a designer, so we went there, to Ponce. And I had my first boyfriend was Puerto Rican, and they're so lovely. I mean, they're not like a normal hardcore American people. And I heard your show, and I thought, wait till I get to tell him this.
That's really cool. It's interesting. Yeah, island culture is something else. It's really about, let's dance, let's drink, let's have a good time, and let's love on each other. Thank you, Maureen. I appreciate it. Hasta la próxima. Until the next time, take care, good night, and God bless. I am Rich Valdez. We're going to do it all again on Monday, but we'll have a couple of replays over the weekend. And on this station, you don't want to move a muscle because there's more to come straight ahead.